So in the last video, I brought up the idea of how different groups will use different terms for their different approaches to addressing demonic bondage, and how terms like exorcism and deliverance, sometimes they may be synonymous to some groups or completely different to others. What's the reality behind this? Well, when it comes to how we understand the process of liberation, the means by which people are freed from demonic bondage, I believe as we study the different models that are out there, we'll find that they fall into one of three major categories of approaches. Probably the best known approach is what I call the confrontational expulsion. This is your Catholic rite of exorcism. This is Protestant exorcism and Orthodox exorcism. I mean, most cases where the person's using the term exorcism, it's referring to a model of confrontational expulsion. However, there are also models of Protestant deliverance, and in some cases Catholic deliverance, that would also be confrontational expulsion. Confrontational expulsion is effectively what the name says. This is where the deliverance minister or the exorcist, the ministry team, whoever is ministering to the person, directly confronts the enemy with the intention of forcefully expelling them from the person. Fairly straightforward. Now, because that approach has often been met with criticism over lots of spiritual antics, a lot of loud manifestations, potentially emotional and spiritual violence, things like that, because there have been cases where those who practice such models have been negligent and people have gotten hurt. Some have responded by developing other models operating off of very different principles, typically, that are non-interactive. And that's my term for them, is they're non-interaction models. That would include models like Neil Anderson's Steps to Freedom in Christ, Neil Lozano's Unbound, various models of inner healing that are applied to cases where there is believed to be demonic bondage with the intention of removing it. The objective with these is to not directly engage with the enemy, but to still remove them nonetheless. Now, the third is what I would refer to as interactive ground removal. These are models that will directly engage with the enemy and the person in some way, usually some form of interrogation, with the intention of finding their sources of attachment in the person and then removing them. So the goal is not to do this dynamic, powerful confrontation with the enemy where the enemy's forced to leave, but instead there is an interaction, but it's more like spiritual surgery in a sense of systematically removing each source of attachment the enemy has within the person and helping them find freedom that way. Many of those who practice that would tout that they tend to provide a much greater bit of spiritual benefit than the confrontational expulsion model. And, well, there can be a little bit of a rivalry between some of the practitioners of the different approaches. We'll put it like that. So, which of these is deliverance, which of these is exorcism? Depends on the group. There are some people out there that you start talking about helping somebody find freedom from the enemy, then it almost doesn't matter what model you use, they'll refer to it as exorcism. While there are others that are very precise in their terms, and only if you're commanding the enemy to leave, then that's an exorcism, but anything else you do would qualify as deliverance. Who's allowed to do what becomes a question at this point as well. Can any Christian do deliverance? Can any Christian do exorcism? Okay, that right there is another question for another video.